Hello and welcome to this tutorial video for Vectorworks Design Studio. This video will serve as a 2D introduction to Vectorworks. In this video, we are going to go over how to draw a soccer field using the 2D drawing capabilities of this software. For right now, we're only going to be focusing on the 2D landscape architecture piece of the software. Additional plugins and uses include site planning, irrigation, electrical. You can even use it for audio and video planning, as well as GIS uses. However, for right now, we are just going to use it in a similar way to a piece of software such as Inkscape or AutoCAD, where you are doing a 2D drawing. So to start off, on the left, we see all of our different tools that we can use that range from the selector to the pan tool to orbit, which you can use when you're doing the 3D space. It's called flyover. I prefer to call it orbit. You can scroll down and see all the different drawing tools that we have. We have a dedicated spiral tool and some other tools that we'll get into in a second. Vectorworks is kind of a combination of Inkscape and Illustrator from Photoshop, and it mixes in the CAD side, such as AutoCAD and the 2D functionality of SolidWorks. We're able to draw out images and plans. So that's what we're going to focus on today. So the one thing to be aware of is that right now Vectorworks is giving us a workspace that represents a sheet of paper. So if you see in the top right, we have a scale. Now this means we are at 1/4 of a scale. So 1/4 of an inch on this sheet of paper is going to actually be 1 foot in real life. Just for you to keep that in mind. So, in order to draw a soccer field, we are first going to need to draw a rectangle. So, we have two different options. We can draw the straight-sided rectangle or the curved corners rectangle, rounded rectangle. We're going to click on this 90-degree rectangle. And the good thing about Vectorworks, a lot of the time, you don't need to click and drag. You just click, and we're just going to put it somewhere in the middle. It doesn't need to be perfect by any means, and then click a second time. We're going to go back to our selection tool, and now we can see the different corners. We can move through all the different snapping arrangements. We're not going to talk about it too much in this video, but if you would like to remove all the snapping, you can click suspend snapping up here, and now you'll be able to freely drag and resize this rectangle however you want without any snapping. What I really like about Vectorworks is that off to the right, you have a very robust ability to both categorize and alter your shapes. So first, we're going to talk about altering your shapes. So if I click right in the middle here, we're looking at the middle or the center of our box's position. So I can see my position relative to the center axis here. You can see on the left, I am aligned at 0 inches on the y-axis, and here I'm aligned at 0 inches on the x-axis. So if I go here, type in 0 and 0, my rectangle is now perfectly centered in my sheet of paper. And it would make sense that if I go off to the top right corner, for example, I get exactly half of my height and half of my width. So, for example, let's just give some dimensions that might be somewhat realistic for a soccer field. Now, again, for right now, we're not worried too much about our dimensions, but your instructor may give you specific measurements to use. So, for example, this looks pretty much like a soccer field. But again, in our scaled ratio, we are using 25 feet and 13 feet and 7 inches that's what it actually represents. But on our sheet of paper here, we're only talking about, we're only looking at these markers that show us the real life size of our rectangle slash our soccer field. So this is the one thing to make sure you clarify with your instructor as you're doing this project, is what are the exact dimensions that they are looking for? Do they want you to use the actual scaled dimension where you have to take into account the scaling factor, or are they okay with you just using this width and height? Now moving on from there, we have our rectangle soccer field. Great. It is now centered in the sheet, and now we can move forward. What we should do right now is, because we've made an edit, we should do File, and we can go to Save As. So here is something to just be aware of. So I'm going to save mine soccer field. So right now, we are only able to save it as a Vectorworks drawing. So that means when I save this file, I will be able to send it to anyone, and they will be able to open it in Vectorworks and have all of the functionality that you would use in this piece of software. This is not saving it as a PDF, or it is not saving it as a picture, for example. For that, you would need to go to Export, and here you have all the different options. The three that you will probably end up using are going to be DXF or DWG. This is how you can import or export from Vectorworks to Inkscape or AutoCAD LT or even SolidWorks. Going down, export as PDF, and going down a little bit more, if you end up using the 3D planning ability in Vectorworks, you can export that as an STL. And an STL is just a generic 3D file format that uses triangles to store what the objects look like and where they are positioned in space. So now that we covered that, we have our file saved, and we can just click save one more time, just double check, no changes to save. Fantastic. So now let's start with the center of the soccer field. We're going to put our midway line. Now the good thing about Vectorworks is that it gives a lot of snapping options. So I'm going to go to the top center, click, come down here, and then click again. And just like that, I have my center line. Go back to my select tool, and we're all good here. This center line is nice because later we'll actually be able to mirror around this. So just keep that in mind. So now let's move to just the left side, and let's start adding some certain things that make a soccer field a soccer field. So first of all, let us add the goal box, or where the area where the goalie can run around and touch the ball with their hands. So what's nice about this is, let's say I really want to get my rectangle in the center here. So if I just go like this, that looks pretty good, but it's not perfect. Again, one of the great things about Vectorworks is I am selected right now on my small rectangle. If I go off to the right and I click this left center position, you can see that I'm about 6 inches off on the y-axis. I'm able to just zero that out. And because I zeroed my large rectangle, this small rectangle is now perfectly in the center of this left side. And you can see center left, it's right in the same line here. Fantastic. So now we can add a little goal. Maybe we can just put it a little bit right here. I know soccer goals aren't inside the field, but just so we can keep it a rectangle, we'll go like this. We can do our same trick here. Go to my left. I got a little bit closer this time, but again, we can just zero that out, and we're all set right now. Now, some soccer fields have this little arc on the edges here that shows where someone would be able to kick a corner kick. So we can use our arc tool. If I come here, I click the center of my arc, click out a little bit, and then I'm actually able to draw the arc. No, perfect. So similar to all the rectangles that we've been drawing, there are a lot of different ways you can modify this arc. You can use the center, X and Y, there's the radius, there's the diameter, there's the start and sweep. So what angle did it start at? It started at 270 and swept 90 degrees all the way to 360. We have the arc length and the chord. So again, you can fine tune this to whatever parameters your instructor gave you for this project. Now again, we are able to draw another arc. Let me come down, go up a little bit, and down. Now as you can see, these arcs look a little bit off. Again, please make sure you follow your instructor's guidance for the exact dimensions of these arcs, as well as anything else that you should be including in this drawing. Another thing that we forgot is the big circle in the center. Again, here is that great midpoint that it snapped and gave to us. Now we can draw it as big as we realistically think. This looks about right. So if we do that, we can now see that the center is 0 in the X, 0 in the Y. We have a radius of about 2 feet, 2 inches. So one interesting thing you'll notice is that we actually can't see this line behind the circle. So before we go on and use the mirror tool, this is something really important that I want to point out that we won't be using in this tutorial, but that is incredibly important if you're going to continue to use Vectorworks. So it's all of this on the right here. We have already covered, for example, in the rectangles, width, height, and the positioning here. But you can see plane, layer, and class. Class gives you the ability to group similar objects into a group that you can easily modify the parameters of. Let's say you are building a house in Vectorworks. You can assign all of the sliding doors in a house to a class, and then all of the basement sliding doors to a subclass of that class, and then just all of the doors in the house to a super class of the sliding doors class. Now I know that kind of got a little messy, but let's say you want to change how thick the glass is on all of these sliding doors. All you have to do is go to the class named sliding doors and you can change it right there. So you probably won't use classes that often because you're probably not making massive designs in Vectorworks like a professional architect would. However, please get used to using this feature so that way it becomes second nature. Layers function exactly like it does in Photoshop, Illustrator, Lightroom, really almost any Adobe product. So if you're familiar with that, you already really know how these layers work. It's just like we're stacking things on top of each other, and we just want to prioritize an order of what covers what. So right now, our circle in the very center of the soccer field is covering our midfield line because of the order we drew them in. If we were to draw the circle first and then the midfield line, we would see the midfield line covering the circle. But because these two are on the same layer, whatever we draw most recently covers whatever we drew before that. So again, just be aware of that. In plane here, we actually don't have any more planes, but this is just another way to view your objects. So honestly, don't worry too much about planes. Really focus on your layers because that's going to help you make sure that, for example, let's say you have a topographic map underneath a building you're working on. If you want to see that topographic map as you're designing that building, that's just something that allows you to overlay the topographic map or have it be underneath the building you're working on or different situations like that. So now that we've covered this piece off to the right, You can also see that you can add data. For example, again, we're doing something very simple with just a soccer field, but there are a lot of inputted and pre-programmed different models that you could use for building a house, or just being an architect or designing an interior space. And let's say you put in a dishwasher, for example. It would have data all on that. So this is actually more of like a smart blueprint that gives you a bunch of different data points that you can edit for each shape or object. In render, we're not worried about that too much, because that's if you want a photorealistic render with light and like 3D simulation on it, which we're not really concerned about right now. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go back to this model, and we want to mirror what we've done here. Because let's say right now we've tweaked all of our adjustments and our lengths, centers, and all of that, and we're very happy with it. Now we don't want to have to go through the same process on the right. So if you scroll down here, there's a mirror button, or mirror tool, more like it. This standard mode actually copies everything over. So if I were to select all these, mirror it down the center, it would actually shift everything to the right. So we want the copy mode, or sorry, duplicate mode. What we should first do, come to our selection tool, click, and I want to hold Shift and click around. Perfect. Now that I have all of this selected, I want to go back to my mirror tool. All I need to do is draw a line. Now, if you look off to the right, I'm still holding down the mouse, because if I let go, you don't need to hold down the mouse. You can actually just click once, move your mouse, and click again. But it shows what I've actually drawn on the left, and then what it's going to mirror off to the right. So those blue outlines, that's what's going to be created when I click again on the endpoint right about now. And now we have a perfectly mirrored goalie box, you could say, and then corner kick areas for this soccer field. Now, let's say you want to add a little text box. Again, double check with your instructor how you want this to be. Maybe you would write your name here, and say that I was the one who drew this soccer field, for example. Come over, I can just drag this however I would like. And now let's say that I am all set with my design. And, oh, perfect. Here's actually a little pop-up I was waiting for. So it says 15 minutes have elapsed since this document was backed up. Do you want to create a backup copy now? So I'll just say yes, sure. So this is kind of an auto-save feature, which is really nice, that not a lot of design softwares have. So let's say I'm all set now, and I'm all done. I can go File, Save. Perfect. Now let's say I just need to export this as a PDF in order to show my professor what I did in Vectorworks. So I can do File, go down to Export, and I want to export this as a PDF. So a lot of this is are settings that you really don't need to change. So for example, export design layers as PDF layers. Most of the time, you just want to export what you're viewing right now. So you really don't have to check this. The one or two things you may want to check are change include this resolution, so 300 dpi. That's fairly standard, as well as the reduction. So let's say you have to send a very large model to a client, for example. If the file size is too large, you can reduce that. However, I recommend just leaving it at none. And now you're able to go to export, save it. I can say, go ahead and save. And now it's asking me, do I want to open up this PDF file? Let me just open it up in Adobe Acrobat. And here we go. So I see it says my soccer field. Here's what I drew. And Now it wants me to sign in, but it said educational edition. It just had to watermark that, so that way we don't use it for commercial use. But this about wraps up the Vectorworks tutorial. Included with this video is a document that has further resources in order to continue learning Vectorworks, as well as the additional tools and add-ins that are available here in this bottom left window, as well as, for example, changing the color of your design, changing the pattern, things like that, using these classes navigations and understanding the layers, things such as that. So if your instructor would like you to do something more complicated than this, please reference that document that is included with this video. And again, this is just a generic soccer field. So again, follow the directions and make sure that you don't submit the .vwx file. You submit a PDF if that's what you need to do. So please just double check your file extensions before you submit. And please feel free to reach out to STS if you are struggling with your project or if your professor is unable to assist you with this. You can go to sts.doit, so it's doit.wisc.edu, and you can find us there and request a one-on-one help session if that's what you need. But good luck designing in Vectorworks.